Hi, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Cosmic Artist. I am so excited to be recording another month overview for you with Thea. July. Oh my God, it's July, and July is about to be absolutely insane. Um, as I was writing down the transits this morning, this afternoon, I was like, whoa, July is a full retrograde month because I feel like a lot of the focus has been on Mercury retrograde. A lot of people have already been talking about it, but more of the focus has been on Uranus shifting into Gemini. But there are a lot of retrogrades coming for us in
Mm-hmm.
July, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. We'll talk more about that in a bit. But Thea, how has June been for you?
Oh my gosh, June feels like a cartwheel in the blink of an eye. I can't believe it's July. How did we even get here? Um, June felt like a song. It felt like a lullaby. Like I feel like it's a necessary lullaby as it prepares us to enter the second half of the year. How was June for you?
June, I feel like felt really busy.
Mm,
Um, and like there was a lot to do and a lot to figure out. And
mm-hmm,
I think that finally last week, so we're recording this on on the 30th of June. So I feel like finally last week was a reprieve from like
mm,
all the cartwheeling and all the crazy, just a bit of like a slowdown. And of course, that makes sense with Mars being freshly in Virgo, kind of just grounding everything that we've been going through.
mm-hmm,
And I think it's so much more beautiful when we actually journal about what we're going through and write it down.
mm-hmm,
I'm saying this because I went to an art club. I went to an art club workshop at Sunspace yesterday. And it was so nice because she had us write about our last week. And I feel like when I journal every day, I don't necessarily see that pattern of, oh, this has been an easier week. But when you journal week by week, then it's like, oh, this week felt like this, and this week felt like this, like the macro versus micro. And I
mm-hmm.
think both have their pros and cons, and both have their times. But I feel like if you are someone that regularly journals or that consistently journals and you feel like you haven't been able to find your flow lately, try doing every week. That might allow a bit more of like perspective,
Yeah.
and it might just allow you to see yourself and your days with more compassion. And I feel like don't we just need so much more compassion right now all around the world?
Mhm. I like that. I like how that's landing also. It offers spaciousness. Um, so like breathing room and
Yeah,
it feels good. Like it feels more expansive to have
yeah.
like a weekly review than a just a day by day brain dump of what's going on.
Mhm. I mean, it also feels very appropriate for Jupiter in Cancer,
Chance.
right? With
Yeah.
Jupiter and Gemini, it was like there are all these thoughts, there are all these things, there are all these words. And now with Cancer, it's like, okay, now we're going through phases. Can
Mm,
we zoom into one phase at a time?
at
And
a
more
time.
often than not, a phase is like a week long, especially for us women
Yeah.
and our cycle.
Yeah.
And of course, we know the beauty and the magic of tracking our cycle and knowing which phase we're in and knowing how that kind of plays into our days. That's something I kind of miss.
Mm,
Um, just like this ebb and flow. And I think when we journal weekly, we get to be a part of that ebb and flow. Okay, so July is big, getting into July. On the first week of July, that Friday, which is the 4th, we have Venus conjunct Uranus in Taurus. Right after that, Venus moves into Gemini. And then on the 5th, which is Saturday, Neptune stations retrograde in Aries at 2 degrees 10 minutes. So that's pretty early in Aries.
mhm.
Neptune's going to be retrograde until December 10.
Oh,
And is going to actually re enter Pisces. So Neptune re enters Pisces on October 22. So we have from now until October 22 with Neptune in Aries and kind of like bringing us bringing us glimpses of what we have been through while Neptune has already been in Aries. But
Mhm.
I think it will be very interesting to go back into Pisces. That feels like a long time ago already. How are you feeling about this week and about these transits?
I feel, I honestly feel very dreamy. I feel very soupy. Like, um, and to be honest, like all the like the first degree of Aries, I don't I don't really feel the fire yet, if that makes sense. Um, there's still a lot of water, obviously, because of Jupiter and Cancer too. Um, it still really feels like a big review for me, just because these planets are still in the first and last, the very critical, the last and first degrees of their sign. Um, it feels like we're on sand. We're not on concrete. That's what it feels like in my
I see that. I feel that. I do feel like we don't feel big fire yet.
body. Mm,
Um, and it just feels like there's been a shift, but we're not really sure what the shift is.
yeah. Yeah.
There's been a lot of uncertainty in the air, I think, in the last few weeks. There's been a lot of change, but also, of course, with change comes uncertainty. So there has been a lot of people being like, are you feeling this change in the air? Are you feeling like you have so many tabs open in your brain? You know, are you feeling like there's so many concerns and questions that you're playing around with? And I don't think this is a single, like, this is something that we're going through. I feel like this is a
Right.
collective thing that we are
For
all
sure.
going through
For
these
sure.
shifts. Um, but what do you have to say about the Venus stuff? What do you have to say about Venus conjunct Uranus and Venus moving into Gemini?
I've been tuning into the chart. And what's really popping, like what's really calling my attention is this week really calls us to remember like this whole Taurus journey of embodiment. We were just talking about embodiment um, before we hit record. And this is, I don't want to say do or die, but it's like, have you really learned embodiment? Because once we enter fire and air territory, there's not going to be so much ground to hold us steady. So that's why we had this Uranus and Taurus journey the past 7 years to really teach us about our bodies, sensuality, movement, food, embodiment. And I feel like it's just so magical how Venus conjoins Uranus in the last degrees of Taurus before it enters Gemini, because there's a reminder, hey, be in your body, because your body is actually going to be the oracle. Your body is the container for all of this change to be rooted, to be grounded. And we know that there's going to be a lot of dysregulation. We're shifting from somatic embodiment, which is body, towards nervous system regulation. And I feel like we're seeing a lot of people talking about the nervous system, talking about regulation, talking about safety, talking about neurodivergence, because we're already shifting. We're feeling the shift from earth to air. So just honoring Venus, valuing our bodies, valuing the present moment, valuing the simple and I'm reminded of the simple boundaries of creature comforts. Just being reminded of the simple comforts that remind us that we are body and that we are matter and that we matter as the shift and the changes continue to shake and crack us open is what's coming to me.
So, talking about Venus, Venus is our values, it is our beauty, it is our relationships, it is what else?
Harmony, balance,
Harmony, our
resources, our
sensuality,
sensuality, what we value, and
money.
yeah, what we value and how we receive and magnetize that.
Okay, so these are Venus themes and then Gemini themes. So this will come in handy because we'll be talking about Gemini the next week as well. So Gemini themes, communication, community, internet, words, expression. What else do you have? Internet, flying,
Close neighbors. You mentioned community,
siblings,
siblings. Um,
studenthood,
yeah, being a student, perspectives, perception, language,
dualities.
language.
Hmm. Okay. Okay, so you can tell probably by listening to us that Gemini is like a lot of two-sidedness, a lot of like could be this or this or this or this. And by this point, we all know quite a bit about Gemini after coming out of Jupiter being in Gemini for a whole year. But we have a new shift happening on the second week. But wait, before we get into that, let's talk about what could be some good practices while Venus is in Gemini.
My gosh, please let pleasure lead your healing. And I'm saying this because I'm so guilty of this. Can you just stay in your joy? Can you stay in your joy and let the pleasure of your joy lead you into your next step? Because once we enter air territory, it's going to be here we go again with everything everywhere, all the time, all at once. 10,000 tabs open, not finishing what we start. So, this is a week to actually soften our routine instead of being rigid in the routine, to speak a desire out loud and allow it to echo and allow it to attract and magnetize things that are actually more in coherence. We're going to be talking about coherence a lot because Uranus is coherence, like frequency, coherence, all of these things. You're gonna hear that and you're gonna receive that in the field more as the months progress. But for this week, just really reflect on what are the simple pleasures and simple comforts that um that can bring you back to the present moment and just let that lead you.
Yeah, I feel like I wrote a poem this morning after so long. And it was about how having a baby, I'm sure, is going to bring me back so deeply into the present moment.
Mm,
And I feel like that is something that is so needed in today's day and age for each one of us that just has technology all around us all the time.
mm,
Like, how can we still cultivate presence even with all of these options around us, even with all of this information floating, even if we have access to 100 different things? How can we still like come back to, wait, but my life is important. My experience is important. And if I'm spending all my experience either learning things or on technology or doing something or the other, then what really is the experience other than an experience of the mind?
yeah.
And it's tricky, isn't it? Because it's easy to come into an experience of the mind and play into distraction and just like allow ourselves to be taken by all of it. But I think there's also such beauty when we actually are able to cultivate that presence, when we're able to drop back in, as we've been taught by Venus and Taurus. It's a reminder like, wait, there actually exists more in us than we think.
Mm.
More answers are within us. I think today's uh in today's day and age, again, someone like me, like I've become so reliant on ChatGPT, right? Can I eat raw tuna pregnant? Like questions like that. But then I feel like it's so important to remember that there are the questions like that we do need to ask, but then there are questions like why should I choose a home birth over a hospital birth, right? And those are the
Right.
questions that we don't need to search that. We just need to sit with those.
Mm.
and just kind of feel into our own meaning of it. I feel like sometimes this technological way is the easy way out.
Right.
And so instead of using the easy way out, how can we use it to aid us? How can we use it to make our experience better, but not take away from our experience, which I think is going to become louder the next week.
Mm.
So the next week, we have on the 7th of July, we have Uranus moving into Gemini. Uranus is going to be in Gemini until November 8th before it moves back into Taurus until next year.
Mm-hmm.
And then on the 11th, we have a full moon in Capricorn at 18 degrees 49 minutes, and that's at 4:36 a.m. And then do we go into Sunday, or is that considered the next week?
Let's go to Sunday. So Monday to Sunday for the week.
Okay, so then on Sunday, which is the 13th, we have Saturn stationing retrograde in
Right.
Aries at 1 degree 56 minutes. And Saturn will be in Aries until November 28th. And by that time, it moves back into Pisces. So you can probably see this trend by now that Neptune moves back into Pisces around October, and then Saturn moves back into Pisces around November.
Mm.
And there's just this return of water with Jupiter in Cancer as well. But then we still have this air for a bit, well, till November with Uranus. But talk to us about Uranus. What is Uranus about? And what do you feel like Uranus and Gemini will look like?
So I think I had a prelude talking about nervous system. Like a lot of people are going to be focused on regulating the nervous system because Uranus in Gemini literally rules the synapses, the wiring, the our nervous system. So Uranus is this planet that doesn't actually revolve, it rotates. So the energetic patterns and energetic themes of Uranus can be disruption, innovation, genius, radical rebellion, revolution. It's chaos magic. It's chaos theory. And it's lightning, essentially. It's surprising. It's disruptive. And you put that planet and you put that in an air sign that is already mutable because Gemini, the mode of Gemini is mutable, means that it's changeable, it's curious, it's chatty, it's air. It likes to communicate. It likes to learn a lot of things. It likes to be in different places. It likes novelty. Here I go again with novelty. And it's duality, it's polarity, it's perspective, it's language, it's communication, it's being in community, it's sharing information. Put that two together, we are starting a new 7 year collective cycle in innovation and thought, in technology, and radically rethinking how we actually relate and the way we use language to inform each other, how we take in information, how we share information, where we take in information, and what we actually believe and use with that information. So it can be disruptive, not to fearmonger or anything, but just to make everyone aware of the pattern. In 2008, when Uranus entered Taurus, we had this massive bubble that exploded in the housing market in the States. So Taurus rules the fiat system, like we said, it's Venus rules, so it rules resources. Now Gemini rules air, technology, information. So we don't know. It's 2025, a year of unprecedented change. When Uranus shifts into this air sign, be open to disruptions, be open to possibilities, be open to change in a radical way beyond your imagination, beyond the bounds of our current known reality, because we're shifting, we're rewiring, we're rethinking, we're innovating. how we actually relate with each other. Let me stop there. And what about you? What's Uranus for you? How do you work with Uranus? How do you feel Uranus entering in Gemini is going to be for all of us?
Whew, so I feel like I got into a sneezing fit as you were talking about Uranus, and I feel like that is Uranus.
That is Gemini. Yeah.
That is Uranus and Gemini, and it's just this like shock surprise aspect. And I think the only way to get through Uranus and Gemini is by approaching it with a lot of curiosity and with a lot of playfulness because Uranus is the trickster. Like I'm thinking about the tarot and how Uranus corresponds to the Fool card. And it's just the beginning of this great adventure of the major arcana. And it's like this need to surrender because we really don't know anything when it comes to surprise. Like, how are we supposed to know if it's a surprise? When it comes to awakening, like, awakenings are not things that we can prepare for.
Mm,
Awakenings are all of a sudden like here and we're awake
mm,
kind of thing. And especially with Uranus and Gemini, it can look very spontaneous. It can look um, very unique and very different, and it can be community led. And I kind of really like this dynamic because when we're thinking about Uranus, Uranus rules Aquarius. So Uranus is comfortable in air territory. However, Uranus moves really fast, like lightning fast in air territory. So there's a part of me that's like, I'm a little bit scared to see how fast things are going to go and what's really going to happen. But there's another part of me that's like, wait, but this is really exciting for what this can bring for technology, what this can bring for our minds, how much more we can learn about the capability of our brains.
yeah.
Because when I think computers, one of the biggest computers is like this system that we have over here. And um, I think there's so much more to be learned about the human body. And it has been a lot about embodiment, but I think now it's going to be a lot more bringing to the mind what we have already learned through embodiment, which
Yeah.
again may look a little bit overwhelming. So I find it very interesting that on the other end of this week, on Friday, we have the full moon in Capricorn being like, wait a second, let's ground back in because it can be really airy. It can be really in the head. It can be really back and forth. But Capricorn comes back and asks us, where does our integrity lie, right? And
Mm,
what's physically safe and what how do we allow ourselves to feel resourced? And when we think of all of these things and when we have answers to all of these things that are not just made up answers because we have to come up with an answer, um, then we are able to navigate terrain that is airy, terrain that is a little bit more surprising because we know where our values lie. We know how we need to feel resourced and whether whether we have technology or not, whether we have information or not, we're resourced within ourselves.
that's beautiful.
That's how I'm feeling about this week. And then with Sa- with Saturn retrograding back into Pisces, I feel like that will just feel soupy, like you said, like just it's like Saturn has finally put on his work hat and is like, let's get going, let's create, let's do all these things that we've been thinking about. But now Saturn's like, okay, you know what? Time for a little break.
Mm-hmm.
You need to learn to surrender again
Mm-hmm.
because life went a little too fast when
Mm-hmm.
Saturn and Neptune moved into Aries. Can we come back to compassion? Like, enough with the warring, enough about the talk about World War III. Can we just go back to heart? Can we just go back to energy? Like, what is the purpose of all of this anyway? Who knows if that's what will happen within each of us, but I feel like that's the message that we're getting. How can we come back to compassion and energy and the purpose behind it all before the spark? How
Mm-hmm.
do you feel about this week?
The same, the same. It's like really getting in touch with our humanity, our shared humanity through grief. Like you said, it opens us up to a different layer of compassion. and how we're actually becoming responsible for each other's um structure, like foundation. How are we becoming ancestors? How are we becoming responsible ancestors for the next generation? And do we want to build it? Do we want to continuously build on the foundation that was built, or do we want to be prepared and be more emotionally mature and stand in integrity with the new set of values that will help us build new foundations for the future? Because fire, we this is alpha omega energies, and we're just going back to Pisces to wrap things up, and we move forward in Aries. We're starting a new age. We're starting it's essentially new again. We're starting everything fresh. And this Gemini energy with Uranus and Gemini, like you said, is it reminds us to see things from fresh eyes, because we need to continue to be visionary if we're creating a new future. But that visionary also has to be landed in inspired action. So we're going back into Pisces, we're dreaming again, we're being reminded of the dream. And as we move forward into Aries, it's like, okay, action time. It's time to ground action.
Hmm. I'm actually really excited for Neptune and Saturn to retrograde. I feel like, I don't know,
Mm.
like you said, it hasn't been fiery,
No.
but it feels like there's been this pressure.
Right, right, right.
And it's like retrograding, I think, may pull back a bit of that pressure just so that we can become a little bit more aware of what's the story under the pressure. Why is the pressure even so strong?
Mm,
That maybe once they station direct again, we'll be like, okay, I understand the story better this time around, which is what always happens with retrogrades, right? And if you're hearing us and you're like, oh my God, they're talking about retrogrades. Why are there retrogrades? This is going to be wild. Retrogrades are totally normal. It happens every year. Around this time of every year is when the bigger planets start retrograding.
mhm,
Nothing wrong with that. All that means is that the energy is slowing down a little bit and it's turning inward a little bit more,
mhm,
which is why I said I'm grateful for it because it will allow us this sense of retrospection and reflection rather than this pressure and this need to deliver and show and perform. And I bring up perform because as we're talking about this, Mercury is in Leo
mm.
where Mercury is going to be stationing retrograde the next week. So, do you feel ready to move into the next week?
I do. I do feel
Okay,
like
so the
it.
next week, on the 18th, which is Friday, we have Mercury stationing retrograde at 15 degrees, 34 minutes of Leo, and will be retrograde until August 11. And then
Ooh.
on the next day, the 19th, we have Sun in Cancer squaring Chiron in Aries. Um, yeah, that's all we have to share for this week. How do you feel about Mercury retrograding
Mm.
in Leo?
The Mercury retrogrades after Uranus moves into Gemini. So Gemini is a Mercury ruled sign. And how I'm feeling into all this is it's like we're being rewired to rethink our shine and our radiance, just because we also have that Sun square Chiron. And how rooted truly are we in our authenticity that we can actually feel comfortable, joyful, and pleasurable when we're thinking, we're speaking, and we're sharing from our radiance. And this is a personal invitation to all of us who are heart centered artists, who are soul entrepreneurs. Frick, the world needs our light. As much as we have been owning and harnessing our shadow, this Mercury retrograde is a cosmic invitation to rethink our light and the radiance that we share in times of darkness. I'm not saying that we're supposed to bypass shadow and darkness. It's just that, what does light mean and what does light mean for you? And it's a beautiful review of how we express ourselves, how we perform our identities versus how we align. in to our truth. And with that sun squaring Chiron near the end of the week, we are shining a light. We are surfacing raw spots around visibility, self worth, leadership. How can we actually step up, step out, be seen without collapsing? And how can we continue expressing ourselves without actually abandoning our truth? And it's an invitation to reclaim that joy and not performance, but practice. How are we practicing in coherence with our truth and our authenticity and our radiance is what's coming up for me.
I feel like it's also this Mercury retrograde is a great time to reconnect with our inner children, but also reconnect with our inner teenagers. And something I was having a conversation with one of my friends recently, and something we do in embodiment after we go feel the emotion is like, okay, when is the last time you remember feeling this? And, oftentimes it's like, oh, when I was a kid, when I was a teenager. But if you're, say, in your 30s, um, maybe you're thinking back to a time in your 20s. If you're in your 40s, maybe you're thinking back to a time in your 30s. Or maybe when you're like in your earlier 40s or earlier 30s. So I think we give so much, what's the word? Weight
Focus. Mm,
weight and focus to inner child work and inner teen work, but it's like inner younger self work. I think that's
mm,
the real work. It's not necessarily about healing parts of us when we were a kid. It's not about healing parts of us when we were teenagers. It's about constantly just working with the different parts of us that have experienced different things. And as we grow, we're experiencing more things. So I don't think it's just about inner child healing. I think this is a great time to look at where are the wounds that we have continued adding up through any
mm,
time in our lives. And this Mercury
mm,
retrograde is a great way to like realize, oh, in my early 30s is when I stopped shining because someone told me something about my vulnerability. Or like,
mm,
oh, in my early 20s is when I stopped showing people who I really am because I went out of town to study and I came back and I felt like they wouldn't realize who I am. Because when we think about inner child stuff, it's more of the basic bigger emotions, but when we think about like younger 20 stuff, younger 30 stuff, there's so much more depth. There is a deeper story there. And yes, an embodiment. We're not really playing into the story, we're feeling it to heal it and to release it. But I think it's valuable to go through that depth because we understand more of who we are. So I think this week is a great week to get clear on the wounds that have hurt us so deep. Um, Throughout whenever it was in our lives, and why
yeah.
did it hurt us that deep, and how can we be our own cheerleaders through it? Like, yes, we have been hurt, but how can we pick ourselves up now? Because when I think of Leo, I think of friends, and when I think of friends, like, we are, or we should be, our own best friends. We should be the ones to pick ourselves up, and of course there are times that we need someone else to help us, and there's nothing wrong with that. But I think there's, again, so much value in when we choose to be there for ourselves before we're there for anyone else. And I don't think that's selfish. I think that actually allows us to show up better, more resourced, and able to help more people. And another thing when I think about Leo is I think of empowerment. So, how are
Mm,
we meant to empower other people if we don't feel empowered ourselves? And how are
mm,
you meant to feel empowered if we're not showing up for ourselves?
mm.
So, I think this is just a great week too, or like with Mercury retrograde, and moving into Leo season, it's just a great time to come back to where are the wounds that are keeping us from shining, as you said.
Right.
Like the shadow work is valuable, but we didn't come to Earth to shadow work our way
Yeah.
through it.
Yeah.
I mean, we didn't come to Earth witnessing a sun come up every single day to not come up ourselves.
Right.
It doesn't make sense. So I think this is a great 3 week period to sit with ourselves and just give ourselves permission to play and to, I don't know, wreck up the stories. I think
Mm.
I think Uranus in Gemini will allow us and will help us create new stories, but it's not until we break the stories that we can create new stories. Again, I'm thinking about Uranus and how it rules Aquarius and how um it's about creating new systems and structures. It's
Yep.
not about sticking with what no longer works.
Yep.
So that's what I have for this week. Anything else you want to add?
Oh my God, I just want to echo what you said because this is a fire elemental year for Mercury. Well, fire and water. It's a transition into a fuller fire elemental year when it enters that fire year next year. And it's everything that you said. It, it was so beautifully put. Empowerment, visibility, agency, insourcing instead of outsourcing. And just to again echo what you said, that this is the time that we are actually rewriting scripts for ourselves, but we can't rewrite if we're not gonna break the pattern. And we're here to love the pattern. We're not here to keep embodying the pattern anymore because that's what we've done all those past versions of ourselves. We are here to flip it so that we can show up, shine, and speak more fully from our hearts. So everything you said was just so beautiful.
Thank you. And in honor of speaking from our hearts, moving to the next week, we have Sun moving into Leo. That happens on the 22nd of July. And then the day after, on the 23rd, we have a few oppositions and squares. So we have Mars in Virgo opposite North Node in Pisces, which means that it's beside the South Node or conjunct the South Node. And then we have Venus in Gemini squaring the North Node in Pisces. What is a square? It's a tense aspect that asks you to look at something differently. Um, and it's also squaring the South Node in, right? Yeah, it's also
Yeah.
squaring the South Node in Virgo. And then we also have Venus in Gemini squaring Mars in Virgo.
Mhm.
And then on the 25th, we have the new moon in Leo. That's at 2 degrees and 7 minutes. It's at 3:10 a.m. Philippine time, if I'm not mistaken. And on the same day, we have Sun in Leo opposite Pluto and Aquarius. This feels like what we've been talking about for the last 10 minutes of like visibility and community and
Mhm.
showing up for collective good.
Mhm.
And but then there is that Pluto being like, but shadow work, and but there's a lot of things that need to be fixed. And then there's Leo that's like, you can still show up and fix it. You can be
Mhm.
showing up while fixing it.
Mhm.
But how do you feel about this week? It feels like a pretty loud week.
It feels like a and my cat. Yep. It feels it feels like a Leo week. My cat wants to join us. So it feels really karmically intense just because we have those squares to the nodes. And every time we have personal planets, so Venus, we have a personal planet and Mars squaring the nodes, it's a turning point. It's a cosmic turning point where we're being asked to consider, do we want to continue moving forward from the past, or do we want to create a new story, which we talked about already. And anytime a planet conjoins with or sits beside the south node, there's a releasing. So we call it a cosmic drain. So, and every time we talk about the nodes, there's something karmic about it. So we're releasing something karmic. And with Venus there has something to do with our relationship. It has something to do with the way we value things, evaluate, and um, put value into things. And it also feels like a showdown between self expression and soul alignment because we can keep expressing, but are we expressing from our wounds or are we sharing from a new story? And I want to bring up something, I want to bring up a term like trauma bragging, especially with all this Chiron energy. Do we really want to keep bragging about our trauma? Or do we want to start reframing how our traumas are actually helping us to get our power back? Are we using it in an empowering way, or are we allowing ourselves to be disempowered by those stories? I mean, it's a new age, it's a new reality. There is a reset, a radiant reset with that new moon opposing Pluto, and it feels like deep heart work where we're purifying things that no longer resonate with us, but made us who we are, to love them, to accept them, to acknowledge them so that they can be received instead of judged or shamed. Because oftentimes our fears just need to be acknowledged and loved and allowed instead of repressed and suppressed. And how are we really allowing them to fully play out in the stage so that they no longer try to take the wheel, and drive our lives? Oftentimes they just really need attention. Like when a child is throwing a tantrum, it just really needs attention. And there's already a lot of studies that prove it only takes 90 seconds for the fullness of whatever emotion that is, whether that's fear, disgust, shame, whatever it is, it just really needs 90 seconds of our pure, undivided, compassionate presence so that can release its hold from us and we can take back our power and drive the wheel of our lives.
I love all of that. And I feel like entering Leo season, this is the season to be big and to own our bigness and to own our too muchness and
Mm,
to really just take up the space that we've been craving to be given.
mm,
As a Leo sun, I find something really interesting happens. I don't know, this might be my Taurus moon, but a lot of times I feel like I want attention to say something. And then when I get the attention, I lose what I wanted to say.
mm,
And I think it's maybe because I'm not ready for that spotlight. Maybe it's because of the Taurus moon trying to just hide a little bit under. But I
mm,
want to invite all of us, like, how can we be so sure about what we have to say that once we get the attention, we can carry it out with like um, such gusto, such awareness of the reason that we're saying it and
mm,
such courage.
mm,
Right? Leo season is all about courage and playfulness.
mm,
And I mean, it's an invitation to not get stuck in the prideful part of it and instead come to the part that's like, if one of us shines, we all shine.
right.
And if it's only one of us shining, what's the point?
Yeah.
So that week is a nice little welcome to Leo season. And then moving into the last week of the month, we have on the 30th, we have Chiron stationing retrograde until January 2. This is going to be at 27 degrees and 9 minutes of Aries. And in 2026, we finally have Chiron shifting into Taurus. We won't talk about that right now because that's a lot.
Hmm.
Um, but we have had Chiron in Aries for a while, right? How many years?
Oh gosh, 7 has been 7 years.
Hmm. So it's been a while, a good while. Okay, and then on the 31st, we have Venus moving into Cancer, and that is how we end July. And to open August, we have a Mercury Cazimi
Hmm.
in Leo. But how do you feel about this week?
It feels like a return to the roots, to nourishment, to safety. And I want to bring up how, with everything that's happening in the world, how safe do we really truly feel in our bodies to feel? Like, we didn't really have models to show us that it's okay to be in the discomfort, to actually expand our capacity, Jupiter and Cancer, to expand our capacity to be in the feeling and to be in the discomfort and to be in the intensity of the moment. Again, it just takes 90 seconds, but we didn't know that. And our ancestors didn't know that. What they knew was survival. And to feel secure, to survive, they had to fight their way through it. They had to perform, they had to produce, they had to do. Meanwhile, for us, it's the other way around. To be more safe, we have to do less, to be in the being, to soften, to nest, to rest, to actually do nothing and understand that that can be productive, to feel and understand that that can be very healing. And so that last week, with all the intensity that happens, the first through 3 weeks, it's like a tender integration. I feel like this last week because it's also a new moon. So it's bringing love, creativity, sensuality back home to the heart. And with Chiron stationing retrograde, again, an invitation for a deeper layer of healing to begin with that new moon. Um, it really feels like a reset. That last week feels like a reset for me.
It sounds like a welcomed reset too, and I think it's
Yeah.
beautiful that it has Venus moving into Cancer, this invitation to feel deeper, to mother ourselves, to
Yeah.
nurture deeper. And I think it's going to be so necessary after a month that's filled with so much air and fire.
For real.
Um,
Yeah.
I think it's going to be a great week to sit with ourselves and sit with our emotions and sit with the feelings that have been coming up again and again and finally
Mm.
pay attention to them rather than keep brushing them under the rug or keep putting them like on the total bottom of our priority list.
Yeah. Yeah. It really feels like a gentle exhale after all the bang as we um start the month. And like a gentle reminder that healing doesn't always have to be fiery, just because Neptune and Saturn are all in fire, but oftentimes it's in the quiet return to safety in our body. Um, but we don't, that's the most difficult and challenging part because we were really never taught that safety is in the nothingness and in the quiet. So this is a cosmic invitation to exhale and stay in the exhale for a while without being so excited to take that next inhale. Like, how can we exhale and stay in the pause and just be there in the total relaxation of the nothingness in between?
Mm, I love that. Okay, well, that takes us to the end of the month. July is now closed, based on this podcast. What do you have to say? Three words or three statements for July?
uh, three statements: radical rest, rethink safety, and innovate joyful leadership.
I love that. I feel like we kind of forgot to bring in that with Leo comes leader energy. So it's a great time to embrace all of our inner leaders. And I think it's an important reminder also to remember that just because someone else is doing it doesn't mean you can't do it. We can
Mm,
all do it together.
mm, mm.
Um, and, even if you're trying to do the same thing, there are always different groups to lead. Okay, my three are mm, authentic feelings,
Mm.
Surprising chaos, and uh, deep integrity.
Ooh,
I feel like without that one, it can't be complete,
deep
especially with a
integrity.
Capricorn full moon coming up.
Yeah, for sure. I like that.
Mhm.
I love that. Oh, and a big exhale.
Amazing. Okay, we did it. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining us for July. We will be back for August. As you can probably tell, I have been off my podcast game. I have not been recording as many podcasts, but I feel like these overviews with Thea is something that really feeds my soul. I hope it feeds your soul as well. And as always, we come back and listen to these for ourselves too when we're navigating through the month. And yeah, I wouldn't want to take that away from us.
Yeah, same.
Thank you, Thea. I appreciate you always.
And you too. Bye, everyone. Till next month. Mwah.